What is up, conscious monkeys? Welcome to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. My name is Clayton. I'll be your host today. And today I am joined by someone who embodies the traveling aspect of this podcast just a little bit more than the spiritual realm. That might be a first. But based on our initial convo, and I'll have to get her to correct me if this sounds wrong, but it sounded like she's starting to explore the spirituality side of things. So that could actually be a solid intro for anyone who has come across this podcast and just, is interested or thinks whatever I'm talking about is absolutely crazy. Because if you talked to me 10 years ago, I would have completely agreed with you. But she is a photographer. She spent over 5 years road tripping to national parks in the U.S., and she is now in the process of creating and directing a documentary about a society of nomads. So without further ado, I welcome to the show Rachael Galipo. So welcome, Rachael.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm super excited to have you. It's quite fascinating because whenever I was in Tustin, if people listen to keep up with this, I was visiting and staying with my aunt and uncle. And my aunt was like, there's this chick who I used to work with. Her daughter is doing kind of like the nomadic lifestyle that you're doing. Maybe you should reach out to her and see. And, I love my aunt, but I was kind of just like, maybe this is just conversation.
That's funny. I mean, I kind of had the same reaction when my mom brought it up. I was like, Mom, this guy messaged me. I think like you're friends with his aunt. Maybe I'll just check it out. And she was like, oh my God, yeah. It was really cute. It was super cute. So, but the connection, small world, for sure.
There's everyone out there that you're kind of looking for. It's just, where to find them kind of thing.
Exactly.
It's always amazing when those little things happen, right? Put it out in the world and it comes back.
Mm-hmm.
So, starting out the conversation, I always love to start and see where people wanted to be when they first grew up. So, Rachael, what was the first thing that you wanted to be whenever you grew up?
So when I was super young, we had a dog named Emily. And Emily was one of my best friends. We went everywhere together. Every time I'd walk into the house, she would be there waiting for me, and we kind of like wrestle each other on the ground. And she really was never apart from me. So I think I wanted to be a veterinarian, like kind of the classic, like I'm only 10 years old and I love animals and I want to help animals. So yeah, I would have to say a veterinarian. At age 10.
Yeah. That was the first time you had that itch of like, all right, I'm going to be a vet.
Yeah, 100%.
Did you ever like see animals? Did something ever happen with Emily where you found yourself wanting to help her, or was it just like an emotional connection to her?
Definitely an emotional connection. She was super comforting whenever like I'd lose an ice hockey game or, something with school wasn't going well. I felt like I could always talk to her. And then about 2 months before one of the Christmases, I can't exactly like remember when, she developed some rare cancer on her back. And it kind of just like rapidly took over. And I wanted to do everything I could. I went to the vet with her. I was by her side constantly. I'd ask my parents to pull me out of school so I could go to the vet with her. And then unfortunately, like 3 days before Christmas, she passed away. And that was like one of the most traumatizing experiences for my dad and my mom, because 3 days before Christmas, supposed to be like super happy and jolly. And I was down for the count for probably weeks.
Damn. Was that whenever, would you have been like 10 in that situation, or was this a little after?
Maybe a little after, like maybe 10 or 11 or 12. I can't really remember.
Damn. Yeah, that'll make the holidays interesting for sure.
Yeah. So my dad kind of said like, I will never get a dog again, unfortunately, because of that. And I feel bad because he loves dogs, but
I mean, that's a hard thing to go through, right? Because you've taken care of this other animal, this other living being, which has a consciousness of its own, and then I'm sure you saw it in pain, and then it hurts you, and it kind of has that cascade effect where you're like, well, was this even worth it? I mean, do you feel like it was worth it considering?
Oh, for sure. I mean, As interesting as it seems, I've learned over more specifically the last 5 years that any experience, whether it be hard or fun or easy, is worth experiencing.
It kind of like
you learn a lot and you take away a lot.
You kind of find those like highs with the lows kind of thing.
Exactly. I mean, our lives would be pretty boring if it was just like always
right
consistent.
That's something I talked about in my episode with my dad, where he's talking about like, you know, he uses like a hiking metaphor, and he was like, well, what type of hike do you want to go on? Do you want to go on a 10-mile hike through, you know, the flatlands of New Mexico, or would you rather go on this mountain where there's ups, downs, easy parts, difficult parts? You know, you have beautiful views, you have just like quick cut views, you know, you have all these different things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's super important to like be able to say you're on like a 10-mile hike, the fact that you're able to experience so many different parts of terrain, so many different climates, you know, if you're in the right place, of course, but it's just awesome to be able to experience many different things all at once.
Have you, and I guess this kind of, maybe we're jumping ahead of it, I don't know, but we're going to jump on it now. Were you, so like in your traveling experiences, I guess you probably saw all the different climates, all the different weathers, all the different terrains of the United States had to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A little background from my end is I grew up in a small town in New Jersey. My family is very into sports and like kind of, you know, get a good education, money, happiness, and things that I do appreciate, but I always felt like there's a little bit more. So I pretty much, after I graduated college, I moved into a van, and I lived in that van for about like 4.5 years. And I basically started in New Jersey, went up into Vermont, then did a drive, I think for like 3 days. My partner and I at the time did 8-hour shifts because we had like a fully kitted van. We had a bed in the back, a kitchen, like a little living area. So we rotate every 8 hours, and then we finally got to Penticton, BC. Really good climbing there. And that's kind of when I started to see a difference in climates, because I mean, Canada just has so much to offer. And I was like, basically, we went from just road for so long, flatland road. And then we entered beautiful BC, where you just have like a range of different areas. You have mountains, you do have flatland, you do have dry climates. And then I started to go down into Smith Rock, which is another high desert, but it's completely different from where we just were. And then we went down into California and Utah and Arizona, a little bit of Colorado. So yeah, I've been definitely lucky enough for the last 4.5 years to experience many different areas and landscapes and climates and weather.
That's awesome. Yeah, you got to see it all. Mm-hmm. And as you were talking there, I kind of realized I feel like I put maybe the cart before the horse a little bit. But hey, you know, it needs to happen.
That's okay.
So if we jump back a little bit then, because I'm interested in how you got to this place of being in a van. So let's unpack your history a little bit more. So you wanted to be a vet, and then did that kind of carry you through middle school into high school, or how did kind of that evolution evolve?
When I was about 12 years old, my grandpa passed away, and my grandma gave me his 35 millimeter camera, and that I was super obsessed. Just like Emily was the thing that was always next to me consistently, that camera turned into something that was never out of my sight. I think I would shoot 2 to 3 rolls a week. I remember my mom having a conversation with me. Film wasn't as expensive when I was 12 years old, but spending money on film and then getting it developed every day was not something that could continue on. Our basement just started to like stack up with film and prints, and she's like, I love this. can we slow down just a little bit? Like, okay.
What quick, what made you so attracted to photography? Was it that this camera had an emotional tie to your grandfather, or were you just infatuated with, I guess maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just what made you so infatuated with taking pictures?
As a kid, I played a lot of sports, and I found it really hard to express myself. Whether that would be through like writing or just school. I love school, but it wasn't top on my list. And then when I found that camera, I started getting really creative. I didn't know I had this creative side until I picked up that camera. I'd ask my friends to come over, and I'd set up like a sheet with like duct tape on the corners in my basement and like have weird lights everywhere. I got really into Photoshop and started kind of putting all of what was going on inside of me onto the canvas that was in front of me. And people really started to like it. My art teachers were really encouraging, specifically Mr. Coleman.
Shout out Mr. Coleman.
I know, shout out Mr. Coleman. We were doing this like drawing practice or something like that, and I was just it wasn't working out for me. And he's like, do you have your camera with you? And I was like, yeah, I do. He's like, go. I give you a hall pass and you go for the next hour, find things to take pictures of.
That's awesome.
And to this day, he still has my collage in his classroom. And we talk every now and then. But
That's awesome.
He'll like send me pictures of some of my old art, and that was just super. I think that was kind of the moment where I was like, wow, like, okay, I'm putting really hard work, things that I'm feeling, things that I want to create onto something, and it's actually coming out pretty darn well.
Yeah. Could you see like a progression of your pictures getting better?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was awful. Like my first roll, like I didn't know how to work a camera. If you aren't familiar, you basically have to pick your settings. Your ISO, your aperture, and basically the speed that the shutter is going to open and close. So I would be taking like blurry pictures and like overexposed pictures, underexposed pictures. And then he kind of sat me down and was like, okay, this is exactly what you need to do, because my grandpa wasn't around anymore to show me that. And my grandma knew how to work it on like an auto setting, and I was like, no, I don't want to do auto. That's no fun. Yeah. Like it's fun to have mistakes, and I want to learn this.
Doesn't give you the control over it.
Exactly.
So was your grandfather then a big photographer?
Well, it's super interesting. No, he wasn't. But he did enjoy taking pictures. I think more so he enjoyed taking pictures of the family, more portrait.
Okay.
Which is beautiful, and he did have a lot of beautiful images. But no, I wouldn't say he was big.
It was more your thing.
Photography.
It resonated a lot more with you.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, incredible that you had such a supportive cast of people around you to support, that vision. Mm-hmm. Did you take that then and go to college for photography?
That was definitely a thought. But I ended up actually going to school. I was a psych major, art minor, and outdoor education.
Okay.
I wanted to pursue art therapy. When I was I think I was a sophomore in college, and I was in like an outdoor rec class. It was actually a rock climbing class. My professor basically expressed that art therapy is cool, and I actually interned at a place, but do you know anything about wilderness therapy? And I can definitely dive into that later. But yeah, so originally it was art therapy, then transitioned into wilderness therapy.
Yeah, that's super cool. Maybe because I think this would be a great thing to kind of touch on if we kind of look at it I mean, I'm going to look at it a lens through a spirituality type of lens, but if you're able to, and maybe let's first dissect what art therapy is, and we'll go through what, what that is, and then what wilderness is, and then see what the similarities are. So what would like art therapy essentially be, or what were you trained to do with art therapy?
When I interned at this place in New Hampshire, basically art therapy is your way of being able to process and talk about any experience, whether it could be a range of different things, but it's just how you are able to process and feel comfortable processing what you need to process with your therapist. So it would be like in a room with a bunch of art supplies, and the therapist would sit with you, and while you're drawing your experience or expressing how you feel on paper with paints, they would talk to you and like kind of break through different layers of whatever you needed to process. Whereas
and so then you're essentially like, are you instructed to paint something, or is it just like if you're going through this type of emotion, try to paint something like this, or
no, it's in my own experience, I only interned there for a little bit. My own experience is the therapist never projects anything onto you. It's you are answering your thoughts, feelings, emotions, your traumas, if you need to get through something onto that piece of paper. And as you are drawing it, the therapist will ask you, so when you drew this, like, what were you feeling? Or when you drew this, why did you draw that? But it's never something that they're projecting.
That's super powerful with any type of therapy, right? Is that absence of projection and just holding like a space to explore different ideas. So do you feel like it was kind of like a meditative process of kind of sitting there with your feelings and trying to process them, and to let your hand almost just do what it naturally needs to do to express this feeling that you're having and try to get you out of your head?
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it's interesting because I felt that way. Like I said, I had a really hard time expressing myself when I was young. And I feel like I developed my own like art therapy through growing up with a camera in hand, always taking pictures, really putting my emotions into my work, which is why I wanted to. Which is
actually super fascinating. You bring that up, right? Because that really is like a meditative thing, right? If you're always looking for something that is in the wild, and I'm no expert in photography, but my Instagram stories, I'll take pictures of things that like resonate with me, right? That have this feeling of connection almost. And so if you're taking that to the next level, where you find yourself behind the lens and you're adding these different filters, and you were saying like these different apertures and the click speed, you're even getting at it at another level where you're like, capturing a more precise emotion almost whenever you press that button.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because say I remember one project I did, and basically I was feeling, I'm sure everyone went through an edgy phase in their middle school, high school age. I was so emo.
I was there with you. I didn't even know emo was it. I didn't even know it was called emo.
I hung out at the mall in Hot Topic like constantly. And if you know where my hometown is, there's not many people like that. So I was kind of like a one of a kind person. And I connected with people, but finding that like one way where I can just do anything and not really care what anyone else thought was so attractive to me. And I honestly didn't even realize that when I was younger. I'm kind of realizing that maybe within the last few years.
That's awesome. I mean, because that's so huge to find something where you're able to like almost break away from that societal mold and say, no, this is me, this is Rachel. It's a picture, and you probably found a way to kind of view that as like, all right, well, I'm taking pictures, and other people can interpret it different ways, but I'm putting myself and my mind and emotions into this picture.
Yeah. exactly that.
Do you see, like, if you look back on your pictures, are you able to kind of like find some sort of correlation between like the energy or the emotions that you were feeling and, you know, the work that you were producing throughout taking those pictures?
Yeah, I would say that some of my work that I produced when I was a little bit younger was pretty dark. I don't know how I got into this whole emo phase, but it was fun while it lasted. Kind of happy it's not here anymore.
I mean, Blink-182 and Green Day are great bands, so that's a great way to get in there.
This is true. This is true. And I still listen to all the music. Believe it or not, I still listen
Love
to
it.
Bring Me the Horizon, Alisana, like Devil's Wear Prada.
Oh, okay. You were deep in there.
I was
deep.
I remember my first mosh pit and everything. Like
you were like emo. None of the surface level.
No, I wish I have. I'll have to send you a picture later because it's hilarious.
We'll make it your artwork for when I promote it.
But yeah, so when there was this one series that I did, and it was all based on reflections. And what I would do is I would set my camera up on a tripod, and I would stand in front of a mirror and do one pose, and then stand in front of the mirror, like somewhere else in the frame, and do another pose. And these poses would be like the reflection is either like the hands on the mirror, or you're screaming at that person that's in reality, pretty much. If you're following what I'm saying.
I think a little.
Yeah. Here, let me explain it like this. So you have a frame, and obviously when you stand in front of a mirror, there's a reflection. The reflection would be some type of emotion that I was feeling really deep down, whether it was like looking at me, like with my arms crossed and like, kind of shaking my head, or kind of like reaching out to grab that person that's in reality, or like a happy sad kind of thing. It's super dark, but
no, I'd love this. I'm super fascinated by this. So the camera was set up, and I guess I'm trying to visualize this, and we need to be descriptive for people. So the camera was set up so that the camera's looking at the mirror, but then it's obviously taking a picture of you in the mirror, and it would be like a dark contrast where you're kind of just seeing your silhouette.
Yeah, like change of clothes, change of makeup, change of hair. And to further this description a little bit more, in Photoshop, so you have two images, right? In Photoshop, you overlay those images, you erase one half, and then have the other come through.
So it was like transparent.
So it's two different. Exactly. It's like two different images laid on top of each other, which then I went through and would make whatever I wanted to show actually show.
Oh, okay. So you could kind of like move it around a little bit. So there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, and this might be a personal question, but out of curiosity, do you think that, the death of your dog played an influence on this emo phase or this dark picture taking?
No, but I kind of think no, I don't think so, because that was maybe a decent like 6 years after. I think I started to kind of go through that phase when I was 16, 17.
You're maybe just more in the exploratory phase of figuring it out.
Yeah, and I think what it really drew out to be is I always felt deep down inside that there was something else out there for me. And kind of drawing back to my family. My family is incredible. They're extremely supportive. They always have been. They were actually just here this past week, wanting to see where I live now, because I lived in a van for the last 4 years. So they were like, wow, you have a shower? You have a kitchen? Oh my God, this is great.
Our Rachel's growing up.
Yeah, Rachel is finally doing it. No, they're still so supportive. But deep down, I always felt like there was something else out there for me. Now, this getting into the whole van thing, getting into the outdoors, that wasn't something that my family necessarily showed me. It was more I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. Someone asked me to go on a hike when I was probably 18. Yeah, 18 then. I fell in love with the outdoors. It took like maybe 30 minutes for me to be like, oh my gosh, what is this? Like, I'm really out here just going on a hike in the woods. Like, I didn't know. Yeah, there's no mosh pit out here. It's just you and the outside and nature and smells and feelings and emotions. So I think when that moment happened, that's when I kind of latched on to kind of the path that I went on, going to school in New Hampshire, going to New Zealand for 6 months, meeting a guy who lived in a van who was like doing his job out of the van. I think he was a freelance writer. Yeah, he was a freelance writer. He's like, I'm so financially stable. You know, this is possible. Like, you can do this. And I was like, oh my God. And I remember the second I got back from New Zealand, I called my dad and my mom and I was like, okay, I'm gonna find a van and I'm gonna live in it. My dad's like, ha, so funny. And I was like, no, but actually I'm going to do this. And yeah, that's kind of like where I realized that whatever I was trying to find, like that one thing that was inside of me from when I was really young to that moment, yeah, just kind of sprouted out, and now it's become my life.
Which, could you summarize that one thing that became your life as connecting with nature?
The one thing that I was looking for or felt like was inside of me that I didn't have when I was growing up, I'd finally found, a connection to nature, a connection to, honestly, I'm addicted to new experiences, like pretty heavily.
It's a good addiction.
I'll get an idea in my head and I'll just, good addiction for sure. Like, my mom literally said this last night when we were out to dinner. She basically said, you know what's one thing I really appreciate that you do? I was like, oh, what? Like, I don't know. I have a bathroom now. And she said, whatever, you have a thought. And it's not that you do it off of like a, I'm going to just do this, like put my mind to it and do it. I think about something, I sit with it, I make sure that it's something I want to do, and then I just do it. Like, I went to New Zealand by myself, like with a program, but I actually wanted to make sure I went out of my way to make sure I didn't know anyone in the program. Just because I don't know, like, I love meeting new people and I love pushing, beyond
pushing the boundaries.
Exactly.
Learning more about yourself.
So, exactly.
And so this, I think, is an interesting segue into the nature therapy. Got a little bit off, but on tangent. I love it though. I absolutely love whenever. No.
Sorry. I tend to do that.
I love it. No apologies. I just want to wrap it back then, and because we were talking about art therapy, and so then what exactly? Let's start off with what is nature therapy?
Yeah, wilderness therapy is essentially, you join a program and we strip away all of life's distractions. So whether that's a phone, a computer, work life, any kind of drugs, alcohol, sexual abuse, family trauma, pretty much everything, you go into the wilderness with nothing you came in with. We change clothes. We change, you get like actual tools that maybe you've never seen before. And we teach you how to live outside in all sorts of climates, all the time, throughout the whole entire year. Basically, like basic survival skills. We teach you how to put up a tarp. We teach you how to tie knots. We teach you how to make a fire with a rock and a bow. We teach you how to cook, because some of these people have never experienced that before. And then pretty much 2 to 3 times a week, the therapist will come out and you have one-on-one sessions. And the coolest part about that is that you're outside with nature, processing what you need to process. And one thing that I saw my students go through is that they accepted that being outside in nature never rejects you. Whereas I think some people go to therapy and it's just like in a room, and therapy is amazing. I I love therapy. I'm going therapy myself, even though there's no necessary reason to, but I just do it because it really helps me. But yeah, so you're outside processing, and you can kind of take a step back from your life and just be in nature and have it kind of resonate with you, whatever you're going through. And like I said, have it accept
Do
you.
you think there's a level of preconceived notions? Like if even say it's like, you go to a traditional therapist. I know in our society, I think our generation's starting to erode away the stigma associated with it, which is absolutely great. But I feel like maybe past generations, one or two ago, it was more of like this, like, oh, something's wrong with you if you're going to a therapist. And so what it kind of signals to me is like, do you feel like whenever you're getting into the wilderness for therapy, it's kind of redefining what therapy is in a sense, as opposed to going into this room, laying on this couch, being talked at, and having all these books kind of around you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not to say that I think that type of therapy is extremely helpful. And I do understand that sometimes people can't take 3 months out of their life to go out into the wilderness. And the program I worked for specifically was, I think the youngest we had was 14, 15, and then any adult. It didn't really matter what age you were. But I think it's a little bit more intensive. Wilderness therapy is a little bit more intensive, and it's kind of like an all the time experience. Whereas when it's just once a week, it's just that hour. And then maybe a little bit of processing after the fact. But yeah, it's kind of like a continuous 3 month, like 2 to 3 month process.
Yeah, that's actually probably a great point as well, right? It's like, okay, you're going out into nothing. You're going out into nature, which that's so crazy that my mind even associates it with quote unquote nothing. It's like, well, you're just like, it's not nothing. It's just, it's redefining, what you're around almost. And so whenever people sign up, let's say for this nature therapy, are they still communicating with everybody that's in that group? And are they like in cabins? Like kind of what does the setup look like for the group as they go out into the nature?
So the program that I used to work for, we had 7 different groups. There would be youth, and then there would be kind of like more specific drug and alcohol, sexual abuse, and then adults, and then male adults, and then female adults. So it's kind of an array of different groups. And we would be able to we would cap it at like 12 people. And it also depends on how many staff you have. So when you sign up for wilderness therapy, or if it's a decision from your parents to bring you into wilderness therapy, we kind of welcome you in. We get you fully outfitted, like I said, with the tools, backpack, shoes, clothes, whatever it may be, food. And we drive out to wherever the location is. And you just kind of like, it's kind of a shock. I mean, even as a staff member, I was shocked. We show you first how to set up a tent, or not even a tent. It was just a tarp with some pea cord, and that's it. So pretty much like survival skills from the start, just so you know how to kind of take care of yourself. But obviously we're teaching people how to do that. Like I said, some of the students that I've worked with had never been camping, had never cooked for themselves, had never hiked, anything like that. So it's really important in my mind, when I was working there, it was really important to kind of welcome them in. It's a big transition to go from like LA to just the middle of nowhere, Oregon, with a bunch of people you don't know. It's quite a big thing to go through. So yeah, you would just kind of teach them what you needed to at first, make them feel welcome, ask if they had any questions. You could definitely answer it if it was appropriate. And And yeah, so you asked if there was cabins. No cabins. You're just under a tarp. We'd make a lot of A-frames were my favorite. But the kids kind of would get creative, kind of make like little forts if they wanted to, but you have to kind of keep in mind that if it rains, is your shelter going to be dry? Are your shoes going to be dry? Is your backpack going to be dry? When you're sleeping, is your sleeping pad or your sleeping bag going to be wet? Like, you have to kind of let them know all of it up front. So then they think about it and then they learn. And yes, a lot of mistakes are made at first, but that's why we have so many staff out there to kind of guide them through it.
It's pretty cool. And I assume you're not going to be able to take, I would assume, food for 3 months. Is there an element of hunting with this as well?
No. We would have, every day we have someone drop off whatever we would need. There's like a lot of communications that the staff have to do every day, multiple times a day. Because obviously, like, it's a big deal being a few miles out in nature with a group of people. So we would regularly have food brought to us.
Okay. It's a good thing to make sure you guys are well fed and hydrated.
Yeah, because we're moving a lot. We would hike every other day to new locations. And like the navigation part of it, if the students were really inclined, we would teach them how to use compasses and everything, but the main point for them being there was to just be there. So they don't have knowledge of time of day. They don't have knowledge of like where we, not where we are, but maps are really only for the staff. So we can get to the next campsite or the next location, or like, oh, I remember that there's like a river a few miles this way if we want to go swimming at some point. So it's just for them to be there and kind of accept being there.
It's really fascinating. It sounds like the whole goal, or the way that I'm hearing it, is almost to pull you out of your mind and to be in this like present moment almost.
Exactly.
To get you just like into nature.
Yeah, like I said, we strip, the like point of it is to strip away every single distraction that you can physically take away. Obviously, the mind is a lot different. And like, yeah, your physical being is different, but just trying to minimize any distractions so you can be present within nature.
It sounds pretty intense. Did you see a lot of, Did you notice like any, what would you want to call it? Like a roller coaster almost, like whenever people would come. Well, first, how often did you do this? Have you done this multiple times? Like as a counselor?
I worked for this program for about, I guess, a year, and you'd have 8 days in the field and then 6 days off.
Okay. 8 days in the field, 6 days off. So you'd be like coming in and out of the sessions.
Yep. There'd be two different shifts. I was on green shift. But basically, yeah, you switch with the other shift every day.
Okay. Were you, so maybe you could still answer this question, but it was like, do you notice whenever people show up, some sort of transition between their mental states almost, like the first week people seem lost, and then the second week they're gaining like experience or something? Was there a sign of progression that you would normally see with people?
Oh yeah. Not with everyone. Like I said, coming into that program is a bit of a shock, and as staff, you do the best you can to kind of minimize that shock and just like make them feel comfortable. But the amount of success that I saw within my students, that was why I kept working there. Maybe the first week, a student hated my guts, threw pasta at me because they didn't want to be there. But then 2 months later, they're graduating and they come up to you and they're like, I didn't realize how badly I needed this experience, and you were a really big part of that. And that's why I did it for so long.
That's incredible. Just energizes you.
Yeah, I didn't really. Yeah, it was one of the most rewarding jobs I had ever ever been a
I can
part
tell.
of.
I can see it and hear it in your voice. It really stuck with you. Are there any like similarities that you would see between the art therapy and then the nature therapy?
Yes, but kind of like I said, I didn't really do much art therapy. I only interned for like maybe a few months. That being said, I did bring art therapy or some of my main practices that I would teach the kids. I do a lot of like mindfulness and then yoga and things like that, but then we would do art in the nature only with natural, like anything really out there, whether it's like making watercolor with flowers or making a dream catcher with sticks, or we do these like really cool therapeutic groups, and we would give them no tools, nothing. And whatever the topic is or whatever they would want to talk about, they would have to express through making it with natural objects within our area.
That's pretty cool.
So yes and no, I guess. I mean, therapy is therapy. It's an incredible tool that we are so lucky and grateful to have. But yeah, I kind of just lost my touch a little bit with art therapy. Once I found wilderness therapy, I kind of just like
it just resonated
right
with you so much more.
Yeah. And honestly, I should have said this, but the main reason why I moved into a van was to work for a wilderness therapy company out west. And I was kind of searching for that. I was searching for that, and it was only supposed to be a 6-month trek. I was only supposed to be in the van for 6 months, and it turned into 4 years.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. How did that? I mean, did it just become like natural? Like you're like, was there a reason you only wanted it to be 4 months, and then just over time you were like, oh, I actually just really enjoy this.
I had to make a deal with my parents.
Okay.
I was 21 at the time, and my dad found the van, and then my mom and dad went to go look at the van because I'd been searching for like a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
And I just was not finding success. I mean, the salt problem in Jersey is ridiculous. So like all the cars that I'd look at or vans were rusty. Yeah. So I lost my train of thought.
You had to make a deal with your parents.
Oh yeah. I had to make a deal. And then once that like 6 mark came, I was like, sorry, I really like this, and I'm like living my life to its fullest right now, and that's all I want.
Maybe I missed it. They were helping you pick it up, and then you had to make a deal with them that after 6 months you were going to stop.
I was going to like move into a house and be more.
Yeah, societal.
Yeah, exactly.
How did they take the news whenever you're at the 6 months? You were like, I'm actually too happy to stop doing this.
So as I was pulling out of the driveway, the day that I was leaving, I got a text like right as I hit the cul-de-sac from my mom going, yeah, you're not coming back. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, so just not even thinking about it.
But she knew.
But yeah, no, my whole...
She knew. She knew you better than you knew yourself.
Oh, she knew, exactly. But one thing that I'm so, so grateful for is how supportive my family has been within these decisions. Definitely was hard for them, I'm sure. I honestly couldn't imagine my son or daughter just having an idea and doing it all the time.
There's definitely that parental thing, and I experienced this with my parents myself. As supportive as they are, there's always those like little times where it's just like a little bit of what ifs. Like, what if this happens? What if that happens? And it's like, I'll figure it out. I'll get there. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And they definitely felt better that I was traveling with someone. And we worked out like amazing the 2 years that we were in the van together. It was just like, wow, this is super powerful and like good connection. And then I had 2 years by myself in the van, and that was like kind of a whole nother experience that I also enjoyed. I
mean, that's cool. It's kind of like got your feet wet with it, and then you're like, all right, I'm ready to do this by myself.
Exactly.
And so you were saying you were 21 whenever you had this van idea. Throughout college, you were becoming a psych major, and what was it, biology? It was psych and...
No, so I was a psych major, art minor, and then outdoor education.
So as
So kind of like a mix of wilderness and art therapy before I even knew that was a thing.
You could just feel it.
I know. I just knew
So
it.
then did you kind of come across art therapy and wilderness therapy as you were going through school? How did that kind of work out? And then is that what you wanted to do after college?
Yeah. So art therapy was kind of the main goal first. And I think I found that my sophomore year in college from my art professor. Then I ended up interning at a place in New Hampshire. And then I think it was junior year or end of sophomore year, I took like a rock climbing not search and rescue, but it was like a high angle rescue course with a professor. And he noticed that I was a psych major, noticed that I was also into art, and then also a minor in outdoor education. And he's like, that's interesting. UNH has like the top wilderness therapy master degree. Like they're one of they take all of the data that can be collected from a majority of the wilderness therapy programs in the States. And then all of that goes to this program and the studies. And he's like, you should look into this. So that's kind of what that trajectory, how that kind of happened. After I moved into the van, I then for a few months was traveling, then started applying to a bunch of places. And then I ended up working at Evoke Wilderness Therapy.
Okay.
And yeah, worked there for like a year while still being in the van.
That's awesome. And so like you wouldn't trade it for anything. It was amazing.
It was amazing. Yes, I definitely I would not take that back. That experience was pretty powerful through and through. There was a lot that went on. Some pretty like traumatizing experiences, and then also some days where I would just be like, wow, I'm going to be here for the next 10 years until I had something happen where I could not work there anymore. But such is life. I would never.
That's awesome. Did you find that even being as a counselor and being around these people who were trying to heal their own past and integrate their own trauma, did you find it therapeutic at all for yourself with the things that you had gone through?
It's quite interesting to be a guide to youth per se, because you would see a lot of, or in my experience, like I would see a lot of myself in some of my students and like, wow, yeah, I remember when I used to think like that, or I remember when I used to act like that. And you just kind of like take a step back and just recognize that, hey, like this is who this person is and you're here to help them and you're only here to guide them. You're not here to tell them how to be, how to act, how to do this, how to that. Whereas I didn't really have that growing up, or I guess maybe to a certain extent I did, because my parents were showing me, that school was super important and education super important. And then you go to college and you get a degree and then you get a good job. And I just kind of knew that there was something else I needed to do before maybe I do that. So yeah, no, it was a pretty cool experience, kind of like watching people and relating, because that's what a lot of my personal experience with wilderness was, being able to sit with someone, level with them, see where they're at, and if it's beneficial to them, relate to them in a way.
And try to kind of like put yourself in their shoes almost, and see, how you were there at some point and how it relates back to your life. That's kind of how you're saying it.
Yeah, in some degree. I mean, not always. Everyone has different life experiences, but it's special when you are able to talk through an experience with someone,
right,
and really be fully present with them. No distractions at all. Just, I hear you, I'm listening, I see you, I see where you're coming from. Can I offer my input? Like having them be like, yes, like I want to like really talk into this. I've had, working that job, I would sit on the dirt, like in the dirt with a student, just talking for hours about whatever they wanted to talk about. And then, like I said, if it is appropriate and it's not triggering or there's no trauma involved, kind of being like, when I was this age, like something like that happened to me. And then they're like, oh my gosh, really? Like, can we talk about it?
That's
So
awesome.
it kind of opens their eyes and doesn't make them feel alone.
Right. Do you feel like that's a big thing with the people that come or were coming to therapy? Was that they felt like they were alone?
I would say yes and no. It's like 50-50.
Okay. Not everybody.
Depends on the student. Yeah, it depends on the student for sure.
Okay. That's pretty cool. And then, so as you were living out of a van, did you kind of travel around like the United States, or were you more just in like one area with this wilderness camp?
I would try really hard to get out and go do the things I wanted to do on my 6 days off, but believe it or not, those 6 days are really important to recover mentally, physically, emotionally. Sure. So yeah, I would try to go like on climbing trips, but realistically, you get out of the field after being in the field for 8 days, sleeping on the ground, having like the same meals, same, you could spice it up a little bit with some dirt, but it only does so much.
Put a little extra dirt in it. Maybe some clay.
Exactly. Yeah. But climbing is a really big part of my life, and that's something that I've also learned that helps me express myself and feel really good. It's like one of the main things that makes me feel really good, along with photography, because I guess it's a little bit more physical than emotional.
Were you taking pictures whenever you were doing this whole process? Like, have you always been just taking pictures along the way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how I paid for my road trip was I would take pictures. My partner was a beautiful writer, and we would write for companies and get a check like every other week. So it was worth it.
You're just able to make it happen.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It kind of, since being 12 and having my first camera, I know photography at some points was not, like, I hadn't picked up my camera for months at one time. And I remember picking it up again and being like, wow, why did I put this down? And then like needed a break and then went back into it. And now I'm currently full-time freelance. I've been freelance for about 7 months now. And that's like a big jump. It's scary and it's a slow process, but it's a process that I've clearly always wanted. So I needed to do it.
I love it. What made it so scary?
It's not consistent. You really have to put yourself out there. You really have to be confident, which at times, like, I'm not always confident. I'm not confident in my work always. I'm not confident in myself always, but I'm learning how to be. And that's going to be a really long process forever, probably.
I think it might be one of those lifelong journeys. And what are like some things you do or anything you read that helps you improve your self-confidence?
I'm someone who needs to be like physical every single day. So whether it's a run or just going to the gym, or if I'm like on a job and, shoots are from like 6 a.m. to like midnight, and then you got to like do all the things on the computer. You got to back everything up. You got to edit some. You have to have things done by the next morning. There's no time to work out. So whether it's like running down the hall in the hotels, or, just like something like quick that I just need to like burst out, basically just move. It gets like my endorphins up. I sweat a little. It moves all the things inside.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, but if I don't work out, or if I feel like I need to work out and I don't, like, that's when I start to kind of feel not as confident. And then also passion projects are a big confidence booster. I just did this passion project in New York with a large format camera, which is the one that I have is a 4x5. So the slides and the film's about maybe that big. And it's like the full on accordion camera. My uncle used to work for the New York Times, and before he passed away, he gave me that camera.
Very cool.
And I haven't had a perfect time to use it. So I basically was visiting a friend in New York, and our shoot fell through that we were supposed to be on. I was like, well, hey, I have this camera. Like, what are we going to just like sit around and do nothing? Like, no, I'm in the city. Like, I'm not a city girl, so I'm going to like city it up. So I went to Washington Square Park and just took a moment to find people who were willing to talk to me, step into their reality, get to know them, and then take their picture however they wanted it to be taken, whether it was skateboarding or just sitting on a bench or like hanging out with a friend. And that having passion projects continuously kind of boosts my confidence for sure.
Do you said that you would talk to them before taking their picture. Do you feel like that made the photo better in some way?
Oh, for sure. The camera itself is pretty attractive. It's a large format film camera that you would see, photojournalists use. Like, it's huge. It could extend out to like this big. It's like a massive box. The thing that I have to carry it in doesn't have wheels. So it's like a massive 30-pound briefcase that I'm like walking around with. People are like, hey, what's going on? And I pull out this big tripod and then this massive camera, and I like have to go underneath the cloth to get the like.
It's like one of those super traditional, like you would see it when they probably just started making cameras. Do you have to like hold? Do you have to like hold a light that it would like flash out too?
You could. I don't have that light. I'm sure my cousin definitely has some of my uncle's lights and old cameras and things like that. But yeah, the camera itself brought the attention, and then I was just the vocal part of it. So I'd go up and be like, hey, haven't used this camera before. It was my uncle's. He worked for the New York Times, and it's like a really cool place to be here in the city using the camera that he used to use around these parts. Can I get to know you for a second? Can I then take your picture? And they'd be like, oh my gosh, yeah. And then they'd tell me about their life a little bit, and then they'd ask for me, and I was like, no, this isn't about me. It's like, I want to know you. Like, this is for you, and then I want to take your portrait.
That's cool. Yeah. Do you feel like getting to know them kind of like? Do you feel like getting to maybe, know them kind of like? My first thought is to say like to bring out the best picture in them.
I was blown away with the pictures I got of people, because I didn't even know if there was light leaks. Like, I wasn't sure. I could just be easily throwing away $500 because the camera doesn't actually work. But I was willing to do it, and I was extremely excited about it. So yeah, I guess to some extent it may have been, I didn't follow up, but it may have been cool that I just picked people out at a really busy park on a Wednesday afternoon and was like, I want to take your picture. I want to get to know you. I want to see, like, I can see you, but can I actually see you?
Right. No, I get where you're going with that. The listeners will understand too. We go pretty deep. I see you, but do I see you?
Exactly. Yeah.
What would draw you to people? Like, how would you end up picking certain people out of a crowd as opposed to other people?
Yeah. I feel like I have a really good sense of reading people's energy. I think over the last now probably 3 years, that's one thing that I've focused on. And whether it would be someone just like reading a book or, like I said, skateboarding, just sitting, I just like look around, and it was such a crazy cool experience because you have so many people just like flying by on bikes and like painting or, having like a women's group with their shirts off in the middle of the park. Like, there was just so much activity. And I would just like sit there and like kind of scan around and then just kind of feel like weird as it sounds, I'd stare at someone and be like, okay, yeah, I want to take a picture. I want to step into their life for a second. But it was never like I was like picking people out of a crowd because of like their looks or what they were doing. It was just more so how they were in that space of chaos.
How they were handling the chaos.
Yeah, 'cause I was overwhelmed. I'm, like I said, not a city girl. I was living in a van at the time, just like, whoa.
There's probably more people than you've seen in the last 5 years in 5 seconds.
Exactly.
That's pretty wild. And so, I guess this might be an interesting part to kind of transition. I remember in our earlier conversation when we kind of did our meet and greet, did you have, you think you mentioned that you were trying to like start dipping your toes into the spiritual realm and into all this energy and cosmic relations or something? How kind of did you find your way to that? Let's start off with that. Like what kind of gravitated you towards that, or what was like the first piece of information where you were like, oh, I didn't realize that this was like a part of spirituality?
Mm-hmm. So I kind of talked about wilderness therapy and how, unfortunately, I was no longer, there was like a specific time where, a specific event where I could no longer be in that environment. And I don't know if like you have to say that, but this is like pretty sensitive topic.
Go for it. We go pretty. Cool. We've had some pretty traumatic conversations on here.
Yeah. Definitely just like putting it out there that this is pretty sensitive. So, November 8th of 2018, when I was like about a year into working with Evoke, unfortunately, we had a youth commit suicide, and I was first on scene. And obviously, like, there's a lot of protocols that were in place, and unfortunately, it had happened. And when I approached this person, my whole world just shattered. There were so many things that went through my head. My senior director was literally standing there. She's like, you just froze and you did not move for like at least 2 minutes. And at that moment, my perspective on life completely changed. It's really interesting, or in that moment, it was really interesting. Like, I didn't realize how fragile life was. And I was just kind of going with the flow and pushing myself to do these things, not really taking into account how fragile my life was and if like I was creating anything traumatic or, whatever it may be. So for about a year, I was down for the count. I was in intensive therapy. I was really trying to not accept what I had gone through and accept that this person took their own life. But I just wanted to kind of understand where they were in that moment. And I needed to go through that process to understand and then kind of change my way of thinking about life.
That's wild. That's something I hope nobody ever has to go through, but that's pretty wild because again, I haven't ever experienced something similar to that. But I know from, I guess, what I've heard is hearsay, but it's like that becoming to that level, first of all, of just, let's say, touching death, right? Or even just seeing another person, who's passed away. It really puts your own life in perspective there's a Stoic principle called memento mori, which is like contemplate death. And the idea is that every day you kind of say to yourself, I'm going to die one day or something. You kind of contemplate it, or you find a way to acknowledge it. It's you see old spirit philosophers, they'll have like a skull on their head, a skull on their desk, and it's to remind you, you do die someday. And I guess it becomes very sobering. It becomes very like, this is what happens at the end of it. And for it to be someone who took their own life, I'm sure that had an extra layer of like, well, why? And so,
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it was definitely, and it even beyond that, like I had to be physical with this person because I had to do CPR. I had to do all the protocols to then be like, okay, unfortunately, this is what it is right now. And there were just like a lot of things that I guess like a lot of things that I could have done differently. But then like this whole instinct thing, like you literally took myself out of being a wilderness guide and just like being a person there with that person. I was probably with them for about 2 hours while we had to figure out what we were doing and how we were going to get the group to safety, and, you know, staff change. There were just so many things that followed. Yeah, it was pretty sobering for sure. Yeah.
I mean, geez. So then I guess, were you able to find some breakthroughs, I guess? Like what were, gosh, it's so difficult, right? What were some like positives maybe that you were able to realize from, you know, being witness to such a tragic event?
Kind of what I was speaking about with just how fragile life is, and how I think to some degree I was taking things for advantage in my personal life, whether it's like with a partner, with my family, and kind of recognizing that people who are in your life are in your life for a reason. And that was kind of from that day, or from when I started to actually heal. I recognized that I wanted to really make connections with people. I wanted to actually step into their life and like meet them where they're at, because I noticed in that point that maybe I didn't meet that person where they were at in that moment, and I couldn't be there with them. And not to say that like that moment was like, oh man, like, is everyone going to do this? No, it's just, I want to know people where they're at when they're at there, whether it's good or bad, traumatizing, or just, you know, I just want to have a conversation. So relationships with people who are really close in my life, and even strangers, like I've started to experiment with, that kind of became super important to me.
Do you feel like that this event kind of inspired you to start doing that type of work that you were doing in New York with like talking to people and then taking their pictures?
Yeah, it totally could. I mean, it didn't necessarily stem from that, because that was something I did maybe a few months ago. But along my living in a van, shortly after that, I had broken up with my partner. So then that meant I was in the van alone. And that kind of pushed me to really branch out to people, strangers, you know, out at the crag, or in like a supermarket, like really random places, just really being with people and not just kind of being surface level with
trying
anyone.
To connect at a different level, no matter where it is.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be what you're going through, just like actually feeling like you connected.
Yeah, like there was some sort of human emotion or connection that occurred. And I remember I was kind of going through not nearly as tragic, but a situation where I realized that I was a little bit more what would be like brash? Is brash the word? Brash? Like I wouldn't be very kind with people, but I was kind of trying to be more funny, like the way I'd make jokes, and people would take them the wrong way, and I wouldn't smile, and yada yada yada. And I remember making it a point, and I probably did this for a couple months, where it was like anytime I would check out at like a counter, my whole goal was to get the other person to laugh before I was finished paying for whatever I was buying. And your story kind of at the end there reminds me of that, where it's like, you know, just because it's another person on the street, or it's, you know, a person who's reading the book or something, or that person behind the cash register, all these things and people we take for granted. It's like taking that extra level to just have a human connection with them, even if it's for 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely learned how far a smile could go.
That's something I learned too. Even when you tell a joke, if you tell a joke, adult smile, and people are like, was that a joke or?
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. No, Yeah. No, we see if we can. This is where it was going. I was asking. This is where it was going. I was asking how you kind of started getting towards the spiritual realm of things, and then you kind of brought up that situation, and then that the therapy integration of it. Was there something along that path that stuck out to you about? I mean, I know spirituality is a very blanket statement. Was there something that kind of sparked in you that you were like, oh, maybe I should check this out, or maybe there's a truth in here that can help explain the situation to me?
Mm-hmm. It's been like 3 years since that has kind of gone on, and I think my journey to my own spirituality is gonna be forever. I think maybe it's because I experienced something so huge and something I never thought would have been brought into my life, even working in therapy. Because, I don't know, our lives are so complex. Like, we can have so many things happen in one day. We can have so many different experiences. We can have so many different thoughts and emotions. And really, I'm just on like some kind of path to be grounded with myself a little bit more, because I think I kind of lost that after that had happened to me. But I have started experiencing a little bit with like microdosing, and I think microdosing for me has allowed me. So when that happened, I closed. I completely, everything just I was not human. I had no emotions. I had no anything. And yeah, I kind of just realized that maybe there's something that I can do to help me get out of that, like break out of that shell. And yeah, just this summer I started microdosing a little bit, and it's just been really unique to see and feel different things. And then start to I write about it too. I'll okay, so I couldn't get myself to process this one thing that happened to me that day. And then I would microdose and then actually be able to think about it. It's super interesting. But on the spiritual path, I think it'll always be continuous. I don't think I'll be on just one point, if that
it does.
It does. I'm still figuring it out, I guess.
I think that's how it starts, is you're like, I'm just figuring it out, and then you'll figure something out, and you'll be like, oh yeah, hell yeah, fuck yeah, I'm there, and then something will occur, and you're like, oh, that was just a layer. And then another thing happens, and then you figure that out, and then there's that was the next layer, and you start to realize that it's more almost like this never-ending onion that's kind of like you just keep peeling back the next thing. Okay, there's the next thing. All right, that's next. It's like there is no almost center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is really cool. To forever be evolving almost.
Yeah. It's
definitely on the emotional side of things, the mental side.
It gets addicting at a certain point. Really finding separation, I guess, between I don't know, separation between your old self, I guess, and your new self, and the traveling, the journey of life, the journey of life.
Yeah, I mean, if I may ask you, what do you think, what is your spiritual journey look like?
What does my spiritual journey look like?
Yeah, where are you at right now?
It's a good question. Somewhere between the beginning and the end. I mean, yeah, I guess what I would say is that now, I guess starting off with defining, let's say, trauma. I think trauma is probably something that can kind of occur at any point in your life. It's something that you could, either integrate, or you could kind of create a new trauma at any point. I think what kind of occurs is that I've started to see it as if your consciousness is this body of water, and the shoreline is your being or who you are today.
Mhm.
And we use a rock to represent trauma. It's almost like, whenever a traumatic event occurs, this rock drops into this body of water. And you go through these waves almost of hitting your shoreline of whatever that trauma was, and they'll pop up in different ways depending on the trauma. Things that I've gone through and kind of integrated or healed would be like sexual trauma that I had whenever I was younger, and again, stuff I still feel to today. There's scarcity around money. And so what happens is once you have identified what that rock is, and that's the hardest part right there, is to identify that this rock was that trauma. And noticing when those waves come to your shoreline. And the more you can notice them, I believe that the more power you have to kind of minimize them and calm them down. It's almost like a meditation where it's like, okay, like this thing has happened again. Let me calm it down or even it out. Yeah, and then there are even certain patterns, and this is where it gets pretty trippy. And I've brought this up before, but now I'm getting a little bit more certain that this is true. Is where I've kind of cleared, let's say, all the things that I remember in this current life to have been traumatic. And I was actually in Brazil, and I remember I was sitting kind of on this little hill, grassy hill, and there was a very specific category of pornography that I was like attracted to. I couldn't stop watching it. And it's like, okay, well, why this pornography? Like, this isn't something, and I'm looking at it through this lens of trauma and healing. And it was like, this category I never experienced in my life. I didn't know anybody who ever did it. I never had any physical representation of this trauma. Well, I looked back and found these things called the Akashic Records, which are you familiar with at all with those?
Mm-mm.
So, it's this essentially library of knowledge that exists in the eternal plane or the spiritual plane, which holds record of everything that has ever occurred in the history of the universe, and then everything that will happen or could happen in the future of the universe. And I sat down and did this meditation, and the meditation kind of walks you through getting you into a very relaxed place. From a scientific lens, you're essentially lowering your brain waves out of beta and down into is it theta or gamma? Theta or delta? I think theta or delta brain waves. You slow them down. You get into this trance-like place. And it walks you through okay, you're entering, this library, and you're looking around. You find a book. You ask the librarian, where's the book of my soul, essentially, whatever it is that is incarnated inside my body. And so you pull the book off, and I basically asked it, where is this coming from? Where is this whole fantasy of mine stemming from? And the pages on the book, and I don't know exactly how to explain it, but you've microdosed, so you can kind of activate this third eye within the third eye, essentially. Yeah, where you can see, but it's not seeing.
Yeah.
You see, but you don't see.
Yeah.
And so the pages of the book flip open, and I see a guy, being chained. It was the medieval times. I saw a guy chained to a wall, a stone wall, and it was kind of he's hung there on his knees. It's crazy because I see it so vividly still. He's on his knees. He's kind of looking down. He's being, his arms are above his head, and these chains are in the wall. And on the table in front of him is his wife, and she's being, brutally, let's say, taken advantage of, to keep it a little bit PC, so we don't feel like we already went there, but we'll try to keep it light, I guess.
No, I understand.
And she's being taken advantage of in brutal ways by the guards, I guess, of the whatever palace, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, what the hell happened? Why did this occur? The books on the page flip again, and I am now that guy who was sitting there. And somehow it's like a dream. You just intrinsically know, all these background things. and I'm the guy's kneeling there before like a king, and the thing that just rushed into my body was that I didn't lie to him, but I didn't tell him the full truth, which blew my mind out of proportion, because that was also something that I was kind of struggling with in my everyday life, was being completely honest with people and not like hiding or like kind of slightly manipulating the truth. And so what came to fruition was that since I had slightly altered the truth with this king, he then decided to punish me in a sense of chaining me up and making me watch these guards, go at it with my wife at the time. And so whoever's familiar with like kind of childhood trauma, I took a childhood healing, is that what it's called? Where you kind of visualize yourself as a child and you talk to them as if you are who you are today.
Yeah.
It's like, it's something like that. And so I basically did that with this guy, and I was like, this is what happened. Like, you altered the truth, and this is where you're at, and this is the punishment, quote unquote. Obviously, it's probably it's an oversimplification of it, but that happened, and so I was just like, I basically just told him like, it's cool, like, we're gonna fix this, right this wrong, become better at this, and notice it from here on out. And so the book closes, I leave the library, all that. Well, you can just be like, okay, maybe Clayton got into this deep state of meditation, stripping balls or something, and they laced the Brazilian water with something. Yeah, you never know. But so all I can say for sure is that since that occurrence, I have only watched that genre of porn like once or twice. Like, it's almost completely eradicated from my life. And I think that's something, again, like you notice those waves. Like, I would notice those waves kind of come back up, and I would be like, okay, no, that's from this. Like, that's not who you are anymore. We're healing from that. And so, I just, it's one of those things where it's just like, I can feel that it was true and something that occurred. Again, I know this is something that doesn't really, scientifically, it's extremely hard for us to prove with the resources and tools we have today. But I guess that's a super long answer to where I'm kind of at with my whole spiritual journey.
Dang. Yeah.
Does any of that like resonate with you, or does that kind of like? I mean, I know you're just dipping your toes in it too. I sound crazy. Feel free to be like.
No, not at all. The one thing that comes up for me is, while I was a wilderness guide, and then after I was a wilderness guide, one thing that I had always said to myself, like pretty much each morning, was, I want to learn how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That was something I passed along to my students. That was something that like I would just always want to recognize. I think because I was always doing these, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to live in a van. I'm going to go to New Zealand. I'm going to be a freelance photographer. I'm going to just randomly move to Salt Lake, West. Like, I'm going to sell my van. I find myself in a position where sometimes kind of like am I uncomfortable right now? No, I'm actually not. Let me process this. Like, I think I'm okay. Oh, that was a little weird. Like, I don't know why I did that, or, yeah. I think it's just important to, like, life is not perfect. You don't want to be always one way. At least I don't. I think that would be pretty hectic for me. But yeah, just always trying to find like how I can learn how to be comfortable in situations that might be not as comfortable.
Well, isn't that kind of something that's like, I picked that up throughout your entire story, right? Where even your mom was pointing out, like, oh, I love how you're able to just decide on something and go and do it. But is that something I guess you had to keep reminding yourself to do, or is that just something that just kind of happened?
No, it's like really natural. It's so natural. It's almost scary. I think though, when I do, it's natural, but I still have to remind myself, like, check
Oh
in,
yeah.
which I think is important. I don't want to get lost in my own reality.
Yeah, that's a good point, is that like examining that internal self-talk, or examining like,
Yeah.
okay, am I just kind of passing time? Is it just, am I
Mhm.
stuck in a rut, or when was the last time I challenged myself, kind of thing?
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely really like facing challenges. Um, yeah.
Is that what got you to Salt Lake? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, the entry to the year has been quite interesting, I will say the least. I got COVID and I was in quarantine for 13 days. I didn't like the whole 5-day thing. I was like, I'm just gonna go all in, whatever. Day after quarantine, I had to break up with my boyfriend because it just wasn't working out. And I think I moved here. I was working for him, and which was amazing, great experience, and he's an amazing person. But I kind of got offered like a job, but then also I was thinking like, oh, cool, I'll be closer to him. I'll also be easier to work for him. I could do like office work and learn a lot of the things that I've been wanting to learn for my own career. And then we broke up, and then I'm like, oh wow, like since we've been traveling so much, I haven't really been in Salt Lake. I haven't really made, yes, I have friends, but I haven't really made like the core people yet. So it was kind of like a little bit of a wake up call, because I didn't really think, like, when after I sold the van, I moved into a place in Bend, Oregon. Then we had met, and then it's been like an amazing 7-ish months. Then yeah, just like couldn't have it happen. So I think I may have been a little bit blinded and just like, yeah, I always just go do what comes to my mind first. And yes, I think about it to some extent, but do I actually think about it all the way through? That's kind of what I'm experiencing right now. But I'm realizing that Salt Lake is a really good community, and I do have those people. It just took me a second to recognize that. So I sat in that really uncomfortable place alone in quarantine and ending a relationship, and just like, okay, so where you're uncomfortable right now, where the heck are you going to go from here to make yourself feel better? And kind of like recognize it.
And try to make yourself more uncomfortable.
Yeah, but like in a positive way.
In a positive way. Yeah.
Yeah, you could be uncomfortable in a positive way.
Oh no.
I do it all the time.
I completely agree with you. Those 2 months in Brazil, whenever you don't know the language, like conversational, but like whenever there's like group conversations and you're the odd person out, it really pushes you to kind of see who you are. Conversational. I guess I just kind of made that about myself. But whenever there's like group conversations, and you're the odd person out. Are you there? It really pushes you. Did I lose you for a sec? Okay, but I see you still. So, are we good? Are you good now? Am I back? All right, cool. Oh no, she disconnected. Let's see if we can invite her back in. Bom, bom, bom. All right, well, I'm probably going to have to cut something, so I'm just going to snap real quick, and maybe she'll rejoin.
That was super weird.
There you are. And she's
Sorry
back.
about that.
And she's back. It's all good. I try to give it a little bit of an outro, but you're back in. We'll see if we have to cut a little bit there, but promise them no cuts, but maybe there's gonna have to be a little bit of one.
I'm sorry.
Technology, right? I think Mercury's in retrograde or something, and it's gonna mess up all the technology. So don't hold it against me, guys. It's the universe.
Yeah.
So what made you choose Salt Lake City? What got you there?
Opportunities. I think I spent about 2.5 weeks in total in Bend, Oregon, in my apartment throughout, like, since I had sold my van in May. I was in Salt Lake so much getting random jobs, and kind of what I am doing is I'm using any job I can get to really fund and put my energy towards photography. So I do model. That's like a really easy way to make money, and it's not something like, I love doing it. It's really fun. I get to meet incredible, beautiful, just people that I can connect with and have fun. Like, oh, you're from here. That's cool. Like, how did you get looped in with these people? And then I also do a lot of like PAing or assisting. So I'll like be a production assistant. I'll like go get the coffees, go get the lunch, like pretty much the bitch work, but in a good way, because you are making connections and you are, I'm definitely not there to be like, hey, I'm also a photographer, so hire me. That is not the case. If the producer or anyone on the set asks you, then yeah, full range, go for it. But I'm only there because I was asked to be there, and it's, freelance is pretty tricky. Like it does go up and down all the time. But yeah, just using that to kind of fund photography is like the biggest goal.
That's pretty cool. And then you were also saying that you had friends, that you had made friends, and I was curious how that works, because I feel like Salt Lake City has a huge Mormon community, and from my experience, they tend to stick together.
Yeah, everyone has this thought about Salt Lake. I did too, because I didn't, even when I was in a van, I maybe went to Utah once, never came to Salt Lake. And I feel like people are going to hate me for saying this right now, because it is expanding really fast. But Salt Lake, like, even if you do run into anyone who is Mormon, they are the nicest people ever. And it's not, I've never felt like they're trying to like project anything onto me. And it's not like they come to the door. Like, every kind of scenario you have, it's not, being here, I've not really experienced it. And like the creative side of like people and groups, it's huge here. The climbing community is huge here. The skiing, snowboarding community, it is extremely big here. So yeah, there is a big like Mormon culture here, but it's not like what you think
you can find your tribe in Salt Lake.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
Okay, so maybe that was a misconceived notion that I used to have.
Yeah, and this is the thing though. I definitely feel like people from Salt Lake want people to think that.
That's clever. That's actually a smart move.
So it is. It's a great place. I love it, and I'm extremely happy. I mean, very different from Oregon, but I love it. And I mean, it's cool because outside of the creative aspect, the physical aspect, within a half an hour radius, you have all of the Wasatch. You have you could go anywhere for snowboarding and skiing. And then within like a 2 to 3 hour radius, you have 15 different climbing areas you could go to.
That's pretty epic.
Day or weekend, like long weekend kind of thing.
Because I traveled out there because University of Utah was actually on my final 3 list for colleges. And so I made a trip out there, and I was absolutely mesmerized by the mountains. Like, we visited in the winter, and when you take that plane ride in, it's absolutely incredible how that view and the way it's all sitting at the base of those mountains. Is that part of what drew you out there?
Yeah. Yeah.
The people.
And the people. The people are pretty damn incredible. I think what I'd been looking for so long within people, like actually having real conversations, whether it be, with someone who's a climber or someone who's a director, it just feels real.
Just feels more genuine.
More real than more genuine, and just like, man, you have an idea. Let's like, how can I help? Like, it's like about helping people. And, it is a part of, in my experience, the production world, especially like in photography and like filmmaking, like people want to help people. But here I really feel like people want to help people.
That's awesome.
Like pursue their dreams.
I mean, it seems to be like what the crux of it is, and you grew up in the Northeast, as so did I, and I feel like that's not so much the vibe that I've experienced. You're shaking your head no. That's not the vibe you've experienced either.
No. I like to think of one thing I typically talk about all the time. I don't know why, but I go to the grocery store in New Jersey. God forbid you smile at someone. I go to the grocery store in Bend, Oregon or Salt Lake, and I smile at someone and we have a full-on conversation about sleep. It's super different. And not to say that New Jersey is filled with horrible people. It's just a different MO, kind of.
Yeah, it's totally like each of these places, and this is something you kind of learn whenever you start to travel, is how all these places have, there's just a little bit of a different vibe. Like, I know people from New York who, when I lived in San Diego for 4 years, San Diego is just so like the smiles, the good vibes, the let's chill. If you're down to chill, we can chill. Like, you want to hang out? We can hang out. But the people that would come there and be like, oh, I'm from New York, I'm from this place, and it's like, all of them would say, it's like, you don't talk to people in elevators, like, you don't say hi to people as you walk by to them. It's I'm doing my thing, and like, let me be.
Exactly.
It's really quite an interesting thing. And maybe something to kind of pivot back around to is the microdosing. Something we talk about on here is the psychedelic life and kind of the journey of all that. So what was your, so I guess, have you had many like psychedelic experiences before the microdosing?
Definitely with microdosing, and then also not microdosing. I've had like maybe 3 like pretty powerful psychedelic experiences, and then just recently I kind of decided like, hey, I'm just gonna like take it a little slower and kind of dive into more about the processing experience. Like, I just want to have help processing some of the things that I can't reach, that I feel like I can't reach. And let's, like, why not? Let's see if this works. And yeah, I guess on and off been microdosing since summer, maybe. But then it's like tricky because on jobs, I would never, I just don't think it would be smart, because I'm like on a really hard job and you're like, no, I'm not trying to process anything right now. I'm just trying to work. So it's very like come and go. But yeah, within this past week, kind of like dealing with my breakup and rounding back to the importance of relationships and connections. It's kind of what I've been processing a lot.
And if you want an interesting segue here, is like psychedelics have a tendency to connect you to that spiritual essence or that consciousness that it's kind of inhabiting us all. So I find that an interesting corollary just in your speech about, how it connects you.
Yeah. And I am, do you know How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan? Have you read that?
No. I've read other books by him, but not that one.
Okay. Yeah. I'm reading his book right now, and pretty much it's actually sitting under my computer. So it would be lifted a little bit, but basically it's about like, the science of psychedelics and what it teaches us about consciousness, dying, depression, addiction, and transcendence.
I gotta write that down.
Yeah, it is.
That's the title of my podcast.
It's amazing. Yeah, and the book cover is like this looking through a window. It's like really, really cool. But yeah, I'm just diving into kind of that book because I don't want to just microdose just to microdose. I want to know like the history behind it. I want to know other people's experiences. I'm not like willy-nilly doing this. And yeah, if my mom and dad are listening to this right now, I love you. I'm doing it smart. But yeah, I want to know more about it. Because when I was going through therapy, my therapist straight up said to me, I'm going to refer you to a psychiatrist. And the difference between a psychologist and a psychologist is they can't prescribe RX or prescription drugs, whereas a psychiatrist can. And if she was telling me that I should go see a psychiatrist, that basically means that she thinks I need to be put on some kind of medication for the depression and anxiety that I was kind of put through. I was like, drugs, RX prescription drugs, I believe if it is a mind-based thing, you can have a different way of helping yourself do that. So whether it's like meditation and yoga in the morning for an hour, which that is something I partake in often, or it's going to see like a naturopathic doctor and explaining the situation and having him spend like 5 months finding the perfect tincture for you to take 3 times a day, sending it like twice like it was a process for sure. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. I want to focus more on the natural way of helping myself with whatever I need to, just process whatever I need to. And then if it doesn't work, cool, I'll try something else.
Good for you.
But that's been like the last
awesome.
3 years. That's been the last 3 years.
Yeah, because it seems like people either go one of two ways. It's either they go this way where they're like, nah, I don't want to try that. Or they try the other stuff. It doesn't work, the RX type stuff. And then they're like, okay, this just made me feel terrible. And then they are like, I need to try something else. And it's funny, the next 2 weeks, I'm actually going to be, I'm releasing episodes with people who do plant medicine ceremonies. So you'll have to check out kind of like their input on it. But it's so fascinating how so much of this stuff you can just change with your mind. Like there was a doctor, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Have you heard of him?
Joe Dispenza sounds familiar, but
okay. So I'll send you a couple books that you should put on your list from him. But his whole story, like he's a chiropractic doctor, but he even got to a place where doctors were like, I forget if it was an accident or some sort of injury. Doctors were telling him he's never going to walk again, like just forget about it, whatever. And just by using his mind, he was able to completely, he walks again now fine. He's like delivering lectures, like, all this stuff. And it's his whole premise is just like, he actually goes in at a scientific level and describes to you like how you lower your brain waves, how you recondition the mind to believe certain things, and can literally perform these, Western medicine miracles just by using your mind.
Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because I don't think my parents knew that they were doing this, but so I, throughout elementary school, middle school, high school, college, was, in like an IEP. I can't remember what it stands for, but basically I was diagnosed with a learning disorder that allowed me to have more of like a hyper focus on one-on-ones and like extra time. And basically I just have a slower way of processing information in school. And right off the bat, my mom took me to a doctor, was like, she has ADHD, 100%, here's Adderall. Mom's like, no, sorry, no. And I'm so grateful that she, and my dad too, I'm so grateful that they decided that was a no.
Yeah.
Instead, they busted their asses every morning and every night doing vocab words, doing math at dinner. Like, I mean, not every dinner, but they would set aside time to like be the Adderall that I needed. Got through college with like flying colors, and I'm super successful in that realm. So I think like them kind of recognizing that RX drugs are not always the answer, kind of like left a little bit of an impression on me. Cause if you try it one way first, like completely, like fully throw yourself in, like my parents did for me. And I understand if it's like diabetes or like cancer or like anything along those lines, could be totally different. I wouldn't know, but just like what I can experience with that is, I want to try other things, more natural resources first before.
It's amazing.
Do anything else.
Well, quick big shout out to Mr. and Mrs. Galipo for going against the grain on that.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
That's huge. I mean, it's also so fascinating to me, and maybe this is also an interesting question. I'm going to kind of let me present it as a question before I project what I've been exposed to. Whenever you went from a psychologist to a psychiatrist, and you said they wanted to put you on medication, right?
Well, I never ended up seeing a psychiatrist, but my psychologist told me that she's referring me to a
Psychiatrist. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Psychiatrist, so that they can prescribe me.
Okay. And so then,
like antidepressants, anti-anxiety.
like SSRIs. So
exactly.
in the conversation with your psychologist, was there ever a dialogue or questions about your eating habits, how much sun exposure you were getting, your exercise? Was that discussed? Okay.
100%. Yes. And what's interesting is after, like a week after that event, I went full on vegan, and I was vegan for about fully, like so strict it was almost messed up, for 3.5 years. And now I'm changing my diet a little bit, I guess, or just like eating what I want to eat. If it's like outsourced right, and if I could afford it, and if it's like the right location. But yeah, they had asked me, I ended up getting a blood test at some point because low iron and like low B12 and all these things that you do and can get from like red meat and chicken and eggs and all that stuff can actually negatively impact, well, it does, if you don't take supplements properly, like every day, like it's a ritual, which I have a really hard time doing sometimes. It can actually cause like low energy, low mood, kind of like depressive states. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that.
It's a thing. I swear. It's a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah.
What I have experienced, and this was something that was brought up on my, I want to say it was episode 6 with Hannah Olsen. She's like a holistic nutritionist. And something she really said that really resonated with me was, if you're not eating the right things, or you're not getting the right food in you, you're not going to be making the right decisions. And the analogy she made, or metaphor, I can never remember the difference between the two, but the analogy she made was, like, if you think about it like a parasite, like she was saying that there were parasites that would like make, what was it? It was something like make rats. It was something like make rats be attracted to like cat urine, so that way rats would be closer to cats, and then cats would eat the rats, and then the parasite would go onto the rat, or onto the cat. And the whole point of that analogy is, like, if you're putting in sugar into your body, if you're not exercising, like, you're going to be making decisions that influence that behavior into that negative space. If you're low on your vitamins, if you're low on your iron, and that's something, and to relate it back to myself, that I started realizing is, like, if I haven't done jujitsu for a day or two, for a couple of days, and I am about to make a big decision, whether it's about relationships or money or the podcast, I'll like think of what I want to do, and then I remind myself, I'm like, and this is the being self-aware, it's like, we haven't worked out in a while, like, are you sure that's the decision you want to make? I'm like, well, okay, I'll go work out, and then let's revisit this. I kid you not, 85-90% of the time, it's the opposite. It's like, no, you don't want to do that. You didn't want to do that.
The mind is so much clearer.
It's so wild.
I can so relate.
And so it's like, you need to be, and this is where a question kind of came from, is that, like, I feel like, or I've been exposed to in Western medicine, we're never really addressing okay, how much sun exposure, or how much water are you drinking? You know, is it your quality of sleep? What foods are you intaking? Are you meditating? Are you, exercising? And I feel like those go to the wayside, and it's just like, oh, you have these symptoms? Well, take this drug, and hopefully it doesn't give you 50 of these other symptoms.
Yeah, and that's terrifying. That was what terrified me the most. I was like, man, if I'm experiencing this, I could also experience so many other things. I don't really want to do that. Right now, currently, in that moment, my life was really bad. I was in a really dark place, and it was terrifying. For my partner at the time, it was terrifying. It started to infect his life. I don't want to add anything else to that. It's too scary.
I mean, there's no depth to worse. I forget which psychologist I heard talk about that, but there is no bottom to it getting worse, And so it's like, you want to start that upward momentum, and hey, maybe it helps some people. I'm not saying this as a blanket statement, but like, it definitely
my personal experience, your personal
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
It just
For sure.
it's just crazy to hear.
It's just crazy.
I laugh anymore. I mean, it's a huge psychological thing as well. But anytime you see a drug commercial on TV, it's like, oh, if you have this one problem, take this drug, and then it's like, oh, well, could cause kidney failure, could cause seizures, could cause death. It's like, what the hell are we doing?
What the hell are we doing?
Yeah. It is mind blowing.
It's
for
so
sure.
wild. But that's good that you find these psychedelic drugs and drugs. I guess plant medicine you find a way to kind of reorientate the brain or how to change the brain and it kind of rewiring the nerves to fire in a different way. And so is there a way you kind of like use that book to accompany your microdosing?
Your microdosing?
More so just to understand it and make sure that really just understand the history, understand, a bit of the science. And I'm sure you know this, but the whole like psychedelic, like psychotherapy is, I hope soon, because it's been something that has been in the works for years, is going to be legal soon and like FDA approved. And we're going to start seeing more people using these treatments in a safe manner, but that's not something that's available right now. So I just want to make sure that I know so much about RX drugs because I went to school for psychology and took medicine classes and I know all this stuff. So like kind of just teaching myself the other end of it.
Well, definitely look into it because I know that there have been vast studies on psychedelics, psilocybin, that were done in like the 60s and 70s. And the huge finding of it was where they, after one session with PTSD patients, 70% were like good. Like they didn't need to go back, and like it was like a 70% success rate.
And that's what my diagnosis was. It was acute adjustment disorder that could potentially lead to PTSD.
Which is interesting because I know I remember being told, let's say, that like with war veterans, like the reason they have PTSD isn't necessarily like what has happened to them, but it's just like what they've experienced.
Exactly.
Which I mean, resonates with your story as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you feel like in your microdosing, it's helped at all, or and I guess it's been on and off, or
it's definitely, it hasn't been consistent, and I think that's kind of the point of it. It needs to be a little consistent. I don't know if I'll ever actually be able to with the type of jobs that I am in, or the type of jobs that I do, but I mean, just this past week, I was able to, like one day I would just sit here and be like, what the heck? Like, I need to get my thoughts straight and I just can't. And I'm having a really hard time recognizing why I'm feeling this way or why I do what I do or how I do things. And, then you kind of I started to spiral out of control, how that is, I'm sure. But then, just taking a moment, kind of meditating and then waking up, taking what I have and then just being able to sit and just really, it's weird. I could literally feel okay, this is why this happens and this is why this happens. And it just keeps on going down. And you're like, oh, okay. And it, I have been accepting why I think I can process in the way that I do and why I do things. And I'm okay with that. I think it makes me feel okay with how I need to process things and why I do what I do or how I think what I think. Whereas it's when I can't achieve that, I almost reject it. I'm like, no, it's not because I'm like this. Or it's not because, but I'm super intro into it and just kind of figuring it out as
Have you ever taken a microdose in your camera and just go out into the woods for a couple hours?
No. But there is this, she's a photographer. Her name's Olivia. She lives in Oregon and she wrote this, I need to find it because I saw it and she did it maybe during the summer or something, but she did a ketamine and microdosing therapeutic treatment. and she just had her camera, and she had some of the most unique images, and then she wrote an article about her experience. But yeah, that's definitely something I would be really interested
Next time you see
in
those
doing.
thoughts spiral, I say use this as your sign to go try that out.
Try that out.
I will, honestly.
That's cool.
That's cool.
Sweet. Wow, I'm kind of at a loss for words, or I lost my train of thought. Whew. How are you doing? Are you good?
I'm
You
good.
still energized?
I'm
You're still
good,
here?
yeah.
You're still energized? You're still here?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely not present.
I love it. I actually lost track of how much time is. Oh wow, we're at 2 hours.
Oh wow.
Jeez.
What are we at? We're at 2 hours, yeah.
Doesn't feel like it.
Doesn't feel like it.
Doesn't. They just fly by. Well, I guess it's maybe then the spot to wrap it up. Go take your camera and psilocybin in the woods. See what that's like.
I should.
Well, thank you for coming on. I would love to leave this open for you. I'm going to grab your links once we get off this chat. I'll grab your links from you, throw it down in the description below. Is there anything that you want to encourage people to do, to talk about, to see, anything like? Oh, wait, I introed it. We didn't even talk about it. The documentary.
Yeah, that is really in the works right now. So
We'll save it.
I don't know if Yeah, maybe
we'll save it as like a teaser for next time around.
We'll save it for a teaser. Yeah.
We'll bring you back on once it's like done and finished and you're ready to like let me know. Actually, let's make that happen right now. Whenever that's done and like you're ready to start promoting it, let me know and I'll bring you back on.
Yeah, I have a critical call tomorrow, and that will basically determine whether or not we're going to follow through with it. So,
all right. Well, I'm going to put my energy into it because I'm already seeing it.
Yeah,
I can already see that
you.
you're going to be coming back on once that's finished. I see it.
Thank you.
See it.
Thank you. Yeah, it'll be cool.
It sounds like a great idea, but maybe people are going to be mad now. No, it'll be all right. She's going to be back on, guys, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But what I was getting at is, I'm going to put your links below. But do you want to share any thoughts with people, any insight, things you would want people to do or question, or even you could wrap it up with the best way to reach you? The floor is yours, whatever you want to tell people.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that the last 5 years, and more specifically the last 3 years, has kind of taught me is really taking time to be present with yourself, whatever that looks like for you, and also allowing space for others. I think it's really important to make deep connections with people, whether, like we kind of talked about, whether it's like a smile in the grocery store or your best friend who needs an hour of your time. That really, really, really means a lot to people, even though they might not recognize it or express it to you. And then kind of the last thing I would say is do things that make you feel uncomfortable, because then it allows you to be comfortable with a lot of other things in your life.
Super powerful words.
Yeah.
Well, Rachel, I appreciate you coming on. Mr. and Mrs. Galipo, thank you guys for not putting her on the SSRIs.
Yeah.
Might not be having this conversation.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So guys, if Conscious Monkeys, if you guys have any work or photography stuff you want for Rachel to go check out her stuff, I'm going to get her links from her after this. So go check the download, or go check the description down below. Go check the downloads. Maybe it is good we're wrapping this up.
No, yeah.
I appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate you making it to here. If you know anybody that's going through similar stuff, maybe that Rachel went through or what she's doing, I highly encourage you to share this with people. I feel like that's the way this all happens, right? That's how you help people, is by being vulnerable. And I appreciate Rachel being as vulnerable as she was. I know it's going to help at least one person. And I feel like that's the whole point of this all. So with that being said, let's grow together.
Yeah.